Good morning, 5th grade. Today we're going to begin our novel, Esperanza Rising. And before we get started, we have a quick write. It says, look at the front page of your book. It states, "He who falls today may rise tomorrow." What is the meaning of the quote? Why might the author include it in the front of the book? So you need to think about, what does this phrase mean? He who falls today may rise tomorrow. And what could that tell us about the lesson that Esperanza is going to learn? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the focus question. It says, what does Mexico look like? Why is Mexico historically significant? That's what you're going to be focusing on in parallel teaching in PlayPosit. And in parallel teaching, we're looking at the second one. How does the author's use of figurative language reveal the characters' perspectives of the land? And so our standards today are being able to describe the setting and interpret figurative language in order to determine the character's perspective of the setting. Our vocabulary words today are resounding, and that's something that's like a loud sound that you can hear over and over again, kind of like an echo. And so this person is experiencing a resounding sound. The next word is arbor, and that describes something. It's outside, and you can see this archway where plants are able to grow on top of the wood and create this like natural archway. That's called an arbor. And then the last is tendril, and these little green things of the plant, those are called tendrils. Plants, especially vines, shoot out tendrils, and that's how they're able to climb up stakes or fences or arbors. All right, tear off the back of your text. It has 3 paragraphs. These are actually 3 separate texts. And as we're reading these texts, we want to find the main idea of each. And we're going to underline details that support our answer, but also the point is to gather more knowledge about the setting of Mexico. What does the landscape look like in Mexico? And that will help us visualize the setting in our story. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is ask a how or why question about the first title, Mexico, Government and Revolution. And the question I came up with is, for box 1A, why is the Mexican government and revolution significant? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to read. And we'll want to make sure we're underlining evidence in the text that will help us get to this main idea. Why is the government and revolution significant? Let's begin reading. From the years 1876 to 1880 and 1884 to 1911, Mexico was ruled by a dictator named Porfirio Diaz. In 1910, the poor and working class people of Mexico rebelled against the wealthy landowners and Diaz. This was called the Mexican Revolution. Workers fought for many reasons. They wanted fair pay, equal rights, and to have better opportunities for their families. The Mexican Revolution was a long and deadly war for the Mexican people, but the outcome changed much of their society. For example, the Mexican Constitution was written during this period in 1917. The Constitution outlined the rules that the government must follow. It also gave all people of Mexico rights, regardless of whether they were workers or landowners. All right, so we want to think about, why was the Mexican government and revolution important? And if we go back to the part that says that they had the Mexican Revolution and they fought for many reasons, we'd want to underline the paragraph that tells us the reasons that they fought. They wanted fair pay, equal rights, and to have a better opportunity. It also tells us that this changed, the revolution changed the outcome of their society. So we would want to make sure we have that underlined. and that the Constitution gave people all over Mexico rights. So everyone got rights to land. And when we're putting this all together, we also want to think about why they had this revolution and why they needed to overthrow the government. And it tells us that in 1910, the poor and working class people rebelled against the wealthy landowners and Diaz. That's why the government and the revolution are significant, is because the working class people rebelled against them so that they could have equal rights. All right, so let's make sure we have all these details underlined in our text. And for our main idea when we're thinking about why is the Mexican government and revolution significant, we'd probably pick out these two sentences here. And in 1B, we would write, in 1910, the poor and working class people of Mexico rebelled against the wealthy landowners and Diaz. And if you want to be more specific, you can add because they wanted equal rights. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the second text. The second text is Mexico, neighbor to the north. All right, and if we're looking at our map of the United States, we know that Mexico's neighbor to the north is the United States. And so this title is kind of giving us a hint that maybe the United States influenced Mexico in some way. So my how or why question for the second text for 2A would be, how did Mexico's neighbor to the north influence Mexico? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 2B. All right, as we're reading, we're looking for the answer to that question, and we want to make sure we underline those answers so we can put it together for a main idea. Let's read. During the Mexican-American War from 1846 to 1848, Mexico lost nearly half its territory to the United States. Within 2 years, the United States had captured Mexico City and won the war. Mexico was forced to sell its northern territories, including Texas and what are now the states of California, Arizona, and New Mexico, to the United States for only $18 million. This was a very low price to pay for the amount of rich land the United States was getting from Mexico. Because of this, the United States and Mexico had very bad relations for many years after the war. All right, and so when we're thinking about how the United States neighbor to the north influenced Mexico, we know that Mexico lost half its territory to the United States. So that's one way they influenced them. We also know that those territories included California, Arizona, and New Mexico. So we would underline that sentence. And because of this, the United States and Mexico had a really bad relationship. And so when I'm thinking about which one of these could be my main idea, I think the biggest impact is that the reason how the United States influenced Mexico was that the United States took half of its land. And so we would write this sentence in box 2B that says, during the Mexican-American War from 1846 to 1848, Mexico lost nearly half its territory to the United States. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the third text. The third text says Mexico, rich versus poor. And when we're thinking about a how or why question, we could say in box 3A, how are the rich and poor significant in Mexico? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the focus question. Play when you're ready to read. Let's read. Throughout Mexico's history, there have been small villages in the countryside. For generations, families have lived and worked on farms that surrounded these villages. The families who worked on the land did not own any part of the farms. This meant that they did not make very much money because they are paid low wages to work for the landowners. In fact, more than 70% of Mexico's population in the 1920s was extremely poor. Okay, so when we are thinking about how were the rich and poor significant, we need to find a sentence that talks about the difference between the two. And it says that most Mexican families worked on land that they didn't own, and they were paid low wages by wealthy landowners. And so we would underline the sentence that said the families who worked on the land didn't own any part of the farms. Instead, they were paid low wages. And for our main idea, we would put that together and we would write, most Mexican families had to work on land owned by a few wealthy men, and they were paid low wages by landowners. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the paragraph. It says, what does Mexico look like? How is Mexico historically significant? All right, so you could talk about how from the third section, it talks about how there's a lot of small villages and countryside and farms, and because of that, the poor class had to work for the richer class for low wages.